A young man fights to save his brother, only to uncover a chilling truth. The real enemy isn't in the courtroom, it's in his own blood. Betrayal, corruption, revenge. This story will tear through everything you thought you knew about justice. You're not ready for what's coming. The Redwood Falls County Courthouse in Minnesota hung heavy with a thick, oppressive air, with a light streaming through the towering windows only served to illuminate the injustice unfolding inside. Jordan Morgan sat pressed into the back row of the public gallery, his hands clenched so tightly that his knuckles had turned bone white. The worn church loan suit he wore still held sharp creases, looking painfully out of place among the expensive suits of the attorneys and officials. Seated high upon the bench was Judge Franklin Dorsey, a man who had ruled over the Redwood Falls judicial system for nearly 3 decades, reclining slightly with a cold, crooked smile. The gavel in his hand slammed down on the bench with a crack that echoed through the courtroom. Marcus Morgan, on charges of armed robbery and first-degree assault, sentenced to life imprisonment. No possibility of parole. A ripple of laughter drifted from the all-white jury box, a sound that pierced Jordan's chest like a blade of ice. He caught sight of his brother, Marcus, 24 years old, clad in a crumpled orange jumpsuit, head bowed silently. No one but Jordan seemed to notice the way Marcus glanced back as he was led away, not with defeat, but with a final, wordless passing of trust. Jordan didn't remember leaving the courthouse. He only knew his legs moved numbly across the cracked sidewalks, Dorsey's mocking laughter still slicing through his mind like an open wound. The Minnesota spring wind swept down the worn streets of Redwood Falls, but for Jordan, the world had frozen over. Back at the dilapidated house on Maple Street, Jordan sank onto the warped wooden floor, the borrowed suit still clinging to him. On the wall, Marcus's old work shirt, a relic of the days they'd spent together at the roadside auto shop, hung untouched. A slow, seething anger rose within him, not just at the trial, but at the entire system engineered to crush people like them. Wiping away his tears, Jordan reached under the bed and pulled out an old notebook. It was the same battered book where he had scribbled notes from countless nights spent poring over law books at the Redwood Falls Public Library, while other kids his age chased football games and weekend parties. Now he understood the law could be a blade, but if wielded right, it could also be a shield against injustice. Jordan didn't sleep that night. Under the dim desk lamp, he read every line of the Minnesota statutes, every clause of the Criminal Procedure Code. Each page he turned brought Marcus's face in a sharper focus in his mind, reminding him that this fight wasn't just about saving his brother. It was about standing for every soul crushed under the weight of a rigged system with no voice to cry out. As the first pale light of dawn slipped through the cracked window pane, Jordan Morgan made a vow. He would not stop until he overturned that wrongful conviction, or he would fall trying. 2 days later, under the scorching sun beating down on the pothole-riddled streets of Redwood Falls, Jordan Carter stood in front of the Redwood Falls County Courthouse, clutching a faded manila envelope to his chest. Inside was the appeal he had painstakingly drafted over 48 sleepless hours, messy handwriting filled with unwavering determination. Every clause and citation carefully pulled from Minnesota state law. Outside the building, the American flag whipped fiercely in the wind. But to Jordan, it felt more like a cruel symbol now, a hollow promise. He drew a deep breath, straightened his worn-out shirt, and stepped inside. The air inside was cold, not just from the humming air conditioners overhead, but from the icy stares that followed him as he walked. Jordan could feel every condescending glance, every whispered smirk as he made his way to the intake counter. Behind the desk sat a blonde white woman. Her nameplate read Mrs. Doris Whitman, who eyed him up and down with a mixture of disdain and amusement. "And what's this, boy?" she sneered, drawing out the last word like a slap across the face. Jordan kept his voice steady. "I'm submitting an appeal from Marcus Morgan, case number 8416. I have the right to file under Section 32, Clause B of the State Code." Mrs. Whitman sniffed loudly, refusing to even touch the envelope. "Little stunts like this don't belong here," she said sharply. "You think throwing on some second-hand suit, and quoting a few statutes makes you somebody. Laughter rippled from a few employees behind her. Jordan felt his face flush hot, but he swallowed the anger, his grip tightening on the envelope. Under Minnesota law, he said firmly, you are not allowed to refuse a properly submitted appeal. If you obstruct this process, I will report it directly to the Attorney General's office. For a moment, the room fell silent. Then a grizzled, stooped man wearing a badge that read, Travis Boone, court clerk assistant, shuffled forward and snatched the envelope from Jordan's hand. His voice was curt, dripping with mockery. Fine, kid, but don't go thinking miracles happen here. This is grown-up law, not some playground for mouthy brats. Jordan stood still, watching as they tossed his appeal onto a pile of papers like it was yesterday's trash. He knew then, the road ahead would be harder than anything he had ever imagined. But at least the first step had been taken. That afternoon, sitting in the cramped kitchen of his rundown house, Jordan spread out the documents he had managed to collect. Among the messy stacks of paper, he found something, a photograph from Marcus's phone. Marcus at Floyd's auto shop, 3 miles away from the robbery scene, time-stamped at 9:27 p.m. The robbery had been reported at 9:25 p.m. If Jordan could prove the photo's authenticity, he would have solid evidence of Marcus's alibi. The fire inside, Jordan roared to life. Now, he had more than just determination. He had the truth on his side. 3 days after filing the appeal, Jordan Morgan left the Redwood Falls Public Library, clutching a fresh stack of notes tightly against his chest. Night had fallen, and the icy winds of early March howled through the empty streets. Jordan quickened his pace, an uneasy feeling gnawing at the back of his neck. As he turned into a narrow alley between 2 red brick buildings, under a flickering street lamp, he heard the screech of tires behind him. Before he could turn around, 2 figures in police uniforms closed in on him. Look who we got here. Redwood Falls little lawyer boy, sneered one of them, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a high and tight haircut. Jordan took a step back, heart hammering in his chest. I haven't done anything wrong. You have no right. His words were cut short as a sudden punch slammed into his gut, doubling him over, still clutching the documents to his chest. The second officer, short and balding, kicked him hard in the ribs. Who do you think you are, punk? The bald cop growled. Think a few crumpled papers are going to save your brother? Jordan groaned, dirt clinging to his face. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the white-hot rage surging inside him. He clutched his bag tighter and struggled to his feet. The bald cop rifled through Jordan's jacket and, with practiced speed, shoved a small plastic baggie filled with green powder into his pocket. Well, what do we have here? The cop mocked, holding the bag up like a trophy. Possession of a controlled substance. Not a small charge, boy. Jordan tried to shout, but the words caught in his throat, crushed under fear and fury. That's not mine. You're planting evidence. Ah, the little guy even knows legal terms now, the tall cop jeered. He twisted Jordan's arm behind his back and slapped on a cold pair of steel cuffs. They slammed Jordan onto the hood of the patrol car, red and blue lights flashing and bathing the filthy alley in harsh color. A few faces peeked out from the windows nearby, but when they saw who was being arrested, they quickly shut their curtains tight. No one in Redwood Falls dared to cross the police. Jordan was shoved into the back seat of a squad car, his scraped knees oozing blood. On the ride back to the station, the 2 officers continued to mock him, each word cutting deeper than any blow. You want to play with the big boys, lawyer boy? The bald cop sneered, leaning back with a cruel laugh. There ain't no law that's going to save you in Redwood Falls. The Redwood Falls Police Department reeked of old bleach and stale fear as Jordan was dragged into the interrogation room. The harsh neon light overhead highlighted every bruise on his battered face. The metal table before him was ice cold, and laid out across it was already a file. Possession of narcotics. Jordan knew, if he was convicted of this, they'd crush him before his fight even had a chance to begin. Sitting there, wrists chained to the table, Jordan made a silent vow. If this system thought they could break him with fists and lies, they had picked the wrong opponent. Jordan Morgan sat numbly in the holding cell, his eyes bruised and his body aching with every throb of his pulse. But when the duty officer carelessly stepped outside to take a phone call, Jordan seized a rare opportunity. Hidden inside the battered jacket he still wore, luckily not thoroughly searched, Jordan had managed to keep a tiny USB drive. It held a secret recording he'd captured using a cheap recorder hidden in his bag. The entire assault, the threats, and the moment the cops stuffed the drug packet into his jacket. A risky plan formed rapidly in Jordan's mind. A counterattack launched from inside the jail. When the officer returned, Jordan immediately faked a severe stomach cramp, collapsing onto the cold cement floor. The guard panicked, shouting for medical assistance. Amid the chaos, Jordan quickly slid the USB into his sock, a spot unlikely to be searched when they transported him to the hospital. 3 days later, Jordan was released on bail, thanks to the quiet intervention of an old neighbor. Mrs. Dolores, a kind-hearted elderly woman who had witnessed everything that night from her window. She had rallied the local community to raise enough funds to temporarily pull Jordan from the jaws of the system. The moment Jordan stepped out of the Redwood Falls police station, he didn't head home. Instead, he walked straight to a small cafe in the neighborhood, where Kayla Bennett was waiting, a young journalist from the Redwood Falls Daily News who had secretly sent Jordan messages of encouragement after Marcus's trial. Kayla, around 24, long curly hair, thick black-rimmed glasses, and sharp, keen eyes, wasted no time when she saw him. "Jordan, listen to me," she said urgently. "I've reviewed the entire recording. If you agree, I'll leak it online tonight. But we need more than just that." Jordan gripped the steaming cup of coffee in his hands. "What do you mean?" Kayla smiled slyly. "A video. You, telling everything. Face to face. So the world can look into your eyes and see the truth." Jordan hesitated for a moment. But then, in his mind, he saw Marcus's eyes full of trust, and he nodded. That night, inside Kayla's tiny rented room, under a soft yellow lamp and walls plastered with sticky notes, Jordan stood in front of the camera. No script, no retakes. He told all. The sneer on Judge Dorsey's face when he sentenced Marcus. The mocking laughter from the jury. The filthy punch in the dark alley, the planted drugs. Every bruise still visible on Jordan's face was a vivid, undeniable testament. At the end of the video, Jordan held the USB up to the lens, his voice hoarse. "This is the truth. This is Redwood Falls, and I will not stay silent." Kayla needed only 15 minutes to edit and blast the clip onto the region's largest media platforms. Within an hour, the video was spreading like wildfire. But the real counterattack was only beginning. An anonymous hacker, using the alias Civic Ghost, reached out to Kayla and Jordan after watching the video. This shadowy figure revealed that they had infiltrated and stolen a massive trove of internal data from the Redwood Falls Police Department, detailed files exposing years of frame-ups, abuse, and bribery stretching back over a decade. Jordan looked at Kayla, his eyes burning with a mix of hope and fury. This time, it wasn't just about Marcus. He was going to drag the entire rotten system into the light. Jordan Morgan's video, along with the explosive audio recording, hit Redwood Falls like a bomb. A town long accustomed to silence and fear now erupted into a sea of protesters. Chants of "Justice for Marcus, justice for Jordan," echoed down the dusty streets, pounding against the grimy windows of the aging government buildings. But in a darker corner of the city, Judge Franklin Dorsey, who had ruled from his seat of power for 20 years, remained unshaken. Inside the private meeting room of Claymore's restaurant, behind a heavy oak door, Dorsey leaned over the table, whispering to a group of unfamiliar men. They were white, bald, heavily tattooed, with eyes as cold as winter steel. The deal was sealed with a curt handshake. That night, while Jordan and Kayla were still working tirelessly with Civic Ghost to prepare the next data release, chaos exploded in the hidden corners of Redwood Falls. It began in the Elmwood neighborhood. A group of men in white hoodies charged into the peaceful protests, swinging baseball bats and hurling Molotov cocktails. Glass shattered. Terrified screams ripped through the stifling night air. Kayla got the first call from a friend attending the protest. She yanked Jordan's sleeve, urgency crackling in her voice. "We have to get out now. They're hunting for you." Jordan frowned, a cold sweat breaking across his back. He knew they weren't just there to break up the protests. They were there to kill him. Without wasting a second gathering their things, Jordan and Kayla bolted out the cafe's back door, plunging into an alley swallowed by darkness where the streetlights had conveniently gone dead. The night wind reeked of gasoline and burning. In the distance, the roar of an engine tore through the air. A black pickup truck, massive tires, a tattered extremist flag whipping from the rear, sped toward them like a rabid beast. On the truck bed, two masked men wielded AR-15 rifles, their bloodthirsty eyes scanning the empty street. Kayla gripped Jordan's hand, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Run!" she screamed. They sprinted into a dilapidated market area, stumbling over broken bricks and rusted metal scraps. The thudding of heavy boots behind them sounded like a hammer cracking their skulls. A bullet zipped past Jordan's ear, slamming into a crumbling concrete wall, sending a cloud of dust into the air. Without looking back, he yanked Kayla into a narrower alley where even the faint glow of streetlights couldn't reach. Their pursuers didn't falter. The heavy shadows charged after them, maniacal laughter slicing through the darkness like the cries of rabid wolves. Just when all hope seemed lost, the blare of a car horn pierced the night from ahead. An old sedan barreled toward them, the back door swinging open. Inside, a member of Civic Ghost, their face finally revealed for the first time, waved frantically. "Get in! Hurry!" In the heat of the moment, Jordan didn't have time to think. He yanked Kayla into the car just as the hunters rounded the corner. The sedan screeched against the asphalt, tires screaming as it tore away from the ambush with inches to spare. Pressing his forehead against the window, gasping for air, Jordan clutched Kayla's hand tightly, feeling the wild thrum of blood coursing through both of them. He knew now Dorsey had officially declared war. And this time, Jordan swore he wouldn't just defend. He would strike back and topple the rotten throne Dorsey clung to with bloody fists. The battered sedan carried Jordan Morgan and Kayla Bennett through the desolate streets of Redwood Falls. Dim yellow streetlights blurred through a misting rain. The Civic Ghost driver, gaunt-faced, with hollow eyes from too many sleepless nights, whispered as he gripped the wheel, "We need to move fast before Dorsey figures out a counterattack." Jordan nodded, exhausted but resolute. He knew time wasn't on their side, and the only real chance to save Marcus, to tear down the entire decayed system, was the appeal he had just completed. The next morning, wearing a borrowed suit that hung loosely on his thin frame, Jordan stepped into the Redwood Falls County Courthouse. At his side was Elliot Monroe, a 35-year-old attorney introduced by Civic Ghost, one of the few brave enough to have challenged Dorsey before. Elliot shook Jordan's hand firmly, his gaze burning with conviction. "Trust me, Jordan," he said. "I'll fight for your brother like he's my own family." Those words warmed Jordan's battered spirit. For the first time in days, he didn't feel alone. The hearing convened in courtroom 4, packed with reporters, protesters, and plenty of hostile eyes lurking in the back rows. Judge Dorsey presided from on high, his black robe draped over his shoulders like a suffocating shroud of corrupted power. His icy stare swept across the courtroom, and when it landed on Jordan, it sliced like steel. Elliot stood and launched into a fiery opening statement about justice, the right to a fair trial, and the weight of the newly discovered alibi evidence. His voice filled the room, resonating off the oak-paneled walls, drawing nods of agreement from the crowd. Jordan clenched his fists, a fragile hope flickering to life inside him. But then everything turned. When Jordan was called to testify, Elliot, the man who was supposed to guide and protect him, suddenly shifted tone. He smiled thinly, then turned, his voice sharp and accusing. "Jordan Morgan, is it true that you tampered with evidence? That you personally altered the timestamp on the alibi photo, didn't you?" Jordan froze. A wave of murmurs surged through the courtroom. Kayla shot up from the gallery, her face drained of color. Jordan stammered, "No, I would never." But Elliot pressed harder, his voice cutting sharper. "We have evidence that the video you provided was tampered with. You deliberately attempted to deceive this court. Each word from Elliot was like a knife driven straight into Jordan, cold and merciless. Judge Dorsey leaned back in his chair, his lips curling into a smug, undisguised smile. Jordan looked around desperately for an anchor, a lifeline. But the faces that once beamed with warmth now brimmed with suspicion and doubt. It hit him like a hammer. He had been set up, and Elliot Monroe, the man he had trusted, had never been on his side. He was just another pawn in Dorsey's rigged game. When the court recessed, Jordan staggered out into the hallway, his mind spinning. Beside him, Kayla clutched his shoulder, whispering through tears. "Don't fall, Jordan. They may have knocked you down today, but the fight isn't over." Jordan lifted his head, and the fire reignited in his eyes. Maybe Civic Ghost, the anonymous group that had fought so hard to help him, had done all they could. But they were still just volunteers, underfunded and outmatched. Elliot had fooled even them, hiding his true allegiance behind a mask of righteousness. Jordan clenched his fists, heart heavy. He understood now. Even the well-meaning could be misled in a system this rotten. Not because they betrayed him, but because they weren't strong enough. In this war, he realized he would have to rely more on himself than anyone else. And he swore, even if the entire system crushed down on his chest, he would not let Marcus be buried in silence. A suffocating night fell over Redwood Falls as Jordan Morgan was dragged from the courtroom, cold steel cuffs biting into his thin wrists. Officers escorted him down into the courthouse's old holding cells, a place with no cameras, no witnesses, only darkness and the stench of rotting sweat. From the hallway, Elliot Monroe watched him passively, his gaze colder than the handshake he had given Jordan that very morning. The heavy steel door slammed shut behind Jordan. The beating started almost immediately. A hulking officer, handpicked by Dorsey himself, drove his baton into Jordan's gut, each blow cracking against his ribs like dry twigs. The officer snarled into Jordan's ear. "This is a message from Judge Dorsey. Any little boy who dares challenge the throne learns the hard way." Jordan doubled over, blood streaking across the cold cement floor, but the fire in his dark eyes burned brighter than ever. All through the night, fists, boots, and curses rained down on him, but they couldn't break his spirit. When the first rays of dawn filtered through the barred windows, Jordan knew. If he stayed here, he would die before he ever got the chance to save Marcus. He had to escape. The opportunity came when the on-duty officer, groggy from a long shift, carelessly left a ring of keys on a chair while heading into the restroom. Jordan, wincing with pain from the handcuffs, quietly dragged himself toward them. His resolve was forged in steel. He used a shard of metal that had broken off the rusted door, a survival skill he had picked up from nights spent buried in law books and dusty survival manuals at the public library. A faint click echoed in the darkness. Jordan snatched the keyring, unlocked the cell door, and bolted into the damp, deserted corridor. He sprinted through the winding hallways, sticking to the shadows, following an old maintenance route he had memorized. At the end of the passage, he reached the evidence storage room. There, he found what he was searching for, a small USB drive hidden within a confiscated evidence file. It was the missing piece Civic Ghost and Kayla had risked everything to gather, the one they had to stash away when Dorsey's forces tightened the noose. Inside that USB, secret offshore bank accounts, emails orchestrating evidence tampering, bribes paid out to jurors, and even audio recordings of Dorsey striking deals with extremist gangs. Jordan clutched the USB tightly in his bleeding hand. As he burst into the back parking lot, sirens blared into life, and searchlights sliced through the pre-dawn gloom like swords. A battered old pickup truck sat abandoned in a corner, the door miraculously unlocked. Without hesitation, Jordan leaped in, slammed the gear into drive, and floored the accelerator. The tires screamed as the truck tore out of the lot, leaving behind a chorus of shouting officers and flashing red lights. He drove until he reached the outskirts, to an abandoned warehouse, one of Civic Ghost's few hidden safe houses. There, battered but alive, Jordan reunited with Kayla. Kayla, Her face still bruised from the mob beating she had survived days before, clutched a battered laptop to her chest as if it were her last lifeline. While Jordan had been locked away in darkness, the battle outside had raged on just as fiercely. Kayla Bennett, the only teammate still standing, had risked everything. She had smuggled out fragments of the damning evidence and sought out a local news station, desperate to expose the monstrous truth about Dorsey. But before she could reach the station, Kayla was ambushed right on Lindell Avenue. 3 men, all in dark clothing and baseball caps, stepped out from a black SUV parked along the curb. No warning, no mercy. They beat her down under the flickering streetlights, ripped the documents from her hands, and whispered into her ear with chilling menace. "Touch Dorsey again, and you won't live to see the morning." Kayla lay crumpled on the sidewalk, her face a mask of blood and bruises, but the fire in her eyes refused to die. With the last ounce of her strength, she managed to slip a small USB drive, the most critical piece, into the lining of her jacket, following the contingency plan she and Jordan had sworn to uphold. All of this had been drilled into them by a civic ghost long before. If you release the evidence too early, they'll silence the witnesses and erase the proof before justice even has a chance to breathe. You have to wait for chaos. Wait until they're too panicked to cover their tracks. Hold the bomb until the final strike. That warning had become their guiding star. Kayla and Jordan both understood. That tiny USB wasn't just files. It was the only sword sharp enough to sever the rotting web of corruption. And now, with Jordan's escape, with sirens wailing across the city, with cracks splintering through the system, it's time to pull the pin, Kayla rasped to Jordan, her voice hoarse from pain. Jordan nodded grimly. Together, they plugged the USB into the battered laptop and hacked straight into the city's largest social media broadcast channel. Within 5 minutes, the evidence flooded every screen in Redwood Falls. Bank statements showing hundreds of thousands of dollars wired from private contractors into Dorsey's personal accounts. Emails detailing jury rigging schemes. A voice recording of Dorsey himself sneering, "If they're poor and black, just stamp guilty. Don't waste my damn time." The internet exploded. Phone lines at the police department, city hall, and even the governor's office collapsed under the avalanche of furious calls demanding suspension, investigation, and prosecution of Dorsey. Even national news outlets jumped in. Redwood Falls engulfed in historic corruption scandal. And just when it seemed the tidal wave couldn't get any bigger, an unexpected twist hit. While Kayla was monitoring the live feed, she detected an unusual data signal. Another handoff from Civic Ghost. They weren't done helping Jordan yet. The new leak revealed an even deadlier secret. A slush fund, over $12 million controlled by Dorsey, used for contract hits and violent crackdowns on protesters. Jordan froze. Kayla gasped. "We're not just exposing a corrupt judge. We're burning down an entire underground empire." Jordan stared out at the blood-red sky over Redwood Falls. He understood. The battle had grown far beyond him now, and there was no turning back. Redwood Falls had never witnessed a night like this. Thousands flooded the streets, waving banners demanding justice. Truck beds carried massive speakers, blasting Dorsey's chilling words on repeat. "Just stamp guilty." Messages, live streams, and the hashtag Justice for Marcus flooded every corner of the internet like a digital hurricane. And when dawn broke, the first hammer blow fell on the rotting system. That very morning, federal agents alongside the Minnesota Bureau of Investigation stormed Dorsey's home, catching him mid-act, desperately trying to burn documents in his fireplace. Outside, the crowd roared, "Dorsey, the shame of Redwood Falls." The wave didn't stop there. The town's police chief, the jury foreman, and multiple prosecutors were handcuffed and led away, their faces ghost pale under the glare of news cameras. Bank accounts linked to the scheme were frozen, luxury mansions sealed off by court order. Private corporations who had secretly funded the regime were placed under federal investigation. Jordan Morgan, dressed in a fraying white shirt, stood silently among the sea of celebration. His hand gripped tightly around Kayla Bennett's, his comrade who had never once let him stand alone, in a moment none of them had dared to imagine. He had done it. He had toppled an empire of corruption. He had saved Marcus. The news of victory spread across Redwood Falls like wildfire through dry timber. Without hesitation, Jordan raced to the federal detention center where Marcus Morgan was awaiting retrial, carrying with him the court's formal dismissal order and a signed release mandate. His heart pounded like a war drum with every stair he climbed. He's getting out. Today. Freedom, Jordan told himself, every step heavy with hope. But when he arrived, a strange atmosphere hung over the facility. No friendly greetings from the guards. No clanging of chains. Only a cold, unsettling silence. There was only suffocating silence and the averted eyes of the prison guards. A young officer, his face pale as paper, approached Jordan, his voice breaking. "Jordan, I'm so sorry. Marcus Morgan was attacked in his cell. He didn't make it." In that moment, Jordan's world exploded. He stood frozen, the release order slipping from his hand, spinning away on the wind like some cruel joke from fate. "No," Jordan whispered, then screamed, a raw, guttural cry that tore through the suffocating silence, as if believing if he ran fast enough, he could still catch hold of his brother's fading life. But he couldn't. Marcus Morgan was gone. A blow from a concealed iron rod during dinner. A final strike from those still loyal to Dorsey, even as their king sat handcuffed and defeated. Justice had come too late. Far too late. That afternoon, the city of Redwood Falls was drowned in two colors. The golden light of victory and the black veil of mourning. At Marcus's memorial, Jordan stood before the gathered crowd, his face bruised, his black suit hanging loosely from his battered frame, but his eyes burned with an unquenchable fire. "We have torn down those who sold justice for a price," he said, voice hoarse and cracked. "But the cost was the life of an innocent man. I swear, Marcus will not die in vain." The entire square fell silent, broken only by the sound of the wind whispering through hand-painted signs. Justice is not revenge. Justice is rebuilding. Inside Jordan, a new vow was forged, deeper, fiercer than anything before. He would not stop until the entire system was rebuilt from its ashes. For Marcus, for all the voices crushed into silence. That night, Redwood Falls glowed under the flicker of countless candles lit in Marcus Morgan's memory. Jordan stood silently in the crowded square, a small candle trembling in his hand against the breeze. His face bore the scars of battles, some still fresh, both on his body and in his soul. Marcus was gone, but Jordan knew the fight was far from over. As the crowd slowly dispersed, leaving only him, Kayla Bennett, and a few close friends huddled under the moonlight, a black SUV without plates slithered out from the shadows. The window lowered, revealing a familiar face, Leonard Morgan, the uncle Jordan had once trusted most. Jordan stepped closer, his heart hammering in his chest. "You did better than I expected, Jordan," Leonard said, his smile cold as steel. "But it ends now. Curtains down." Jordan froze. "Uncle, what are you talking about?" Leonard narrowed his eyes, his voice dropping to a low, metallic tone. "You thought Dorsey was the kingpin? Just a rotten little judge? Dorsey was a pawn. I built this whole system." Each word drove into Jordan's chest like a dagger. "It was you." Jordan choked. "You let Marcus die?" Leonard leaned back in his seat, exhaling with a mock sigh of regret. "Marcus was too stubborn. He was about to spill everything. I had no choice." The air turned to ice. Kayla stepped forward, her face drained of color. "He's not just behind Dorsey," she whispered. "He's the one pulling the strings behind the corporate prison sponsors. An entire empire." Leonard nodded, not even bothering to deny it. "I tried to keep you out of it, Jordan, but you just had to throw yourself into the fire." "I'm sorry." Jordan clenched his fists. His whole body trembled, not from fear, but from a fury boiling so fiercely it threatened to tear him apart. "I'm not afraid of you," he growled, each word cutting like a blade. "I'll bring the truth into the light, even if it means going against my own blood." A heavy silence hung between them. Leonard studied him for a long moment, as if reassessing the opponent standing before him. Then, with a look of tired disappointment, he nodded to his driver. The black SUV backed away and disappeared into the night. But Jordan knew the declaration of war had been made. There was no turning back. That night, sitting beside Kayla in their shabby motel room, Jordan learned a bitter truth for the first time. Sometimes, the most dangerous traitors aren't your enemies from the outside. They're the blood running through your own veins. Trust could be poisoned. Family could betray you. But ideals, the belief in real justice, must never waver. Jordan stared out the window. Above Redwood Falls, the night sky was sprinkled with faint points of light. Hope flickering, fragile but alive, against the endless dark. Late into the night, after Kayla had left, Jordan sat alone, his body battered but his mind sharp as a blade. He placed the USB drive, the only asset he had left, on the rotting wooden table, his hand clenching so tightly his knuckles turned white. Leonard Morgan had sunk his claws deeper than anyone could have imagined. But Jordan knew instincts alone weren't enough. He started digging through the hidden folders on the drive, layer after layer of heavy encryption, the ones Kayla and Civic Ghost had once warned him not to touch until the time was right, finally peeled away under his persistence. And there it was, the original, unfiltered archive. Contracts funneling money between Leonard and private prison companies. Direct orders to police departments to crush major protests. Even emails instructing Dorsey himself. Silence Marcus Morgan permanently. The blurred text on the cracked laptop screen hit Jordan like a blade to the heart. There was no longer any doubt. Leonard Morgan was the monster behind the entire rotten network. And now Jordan held the weapon that could bring the whole empire crashing down. He swore, even if he had to stand alone, he would push this fight to the very end. The real battle was only just beginning. And this time, Jordan Morgan would show no mercy. At dawn the next morning, Redwood Falls still lay shrouded in smoke and ash from the nights of protests. Jordan stood alone atop an abandoned building, looking down at the city groaning beneath the wreckage and the rising cries for justice. In his hand, the USB, containing the complete data on the cabal, the judges, officials, businessmen who had manipulated the entire justice system for decades, remained intact. Marcus was gone. Kayla was on the run, risking herself to mislead the last remnants of Dorsey's loyalists and the retaliating forces loyal to Leonard. Buying Jordan the window, he needed to strike the final blow. Family had been shattered by the very blood ties he once trusted. Jordan had lost everything, but he would not break. As the first rays of the sun pierced the smoky horizon, Jordan quietly made his way into the headquarters of an independent media outlet. His eyes were sunken, bruised from sleepless nights, but the look in them was sharp, honed like a blade forged through fire. "Are you sure?" whispered the editor, fingers flying over the keyboard. Jordan nodded. "Release everything. Hold nothing back." And so the files began to flood the media. Lists of names, bribes, deaths covered up under hundreds of forged death certificates. The names of Leonard Morgan, Dorsey, and a slew of once untouchable giants flashed across every screen for the world to see. And soon, Leonard Morgan would face the full weight of justice for the crimes he had orchestrated. Redwood Falls shook to its core. Not just Redwood Falls, but the entire United States. Breaking news flooded the airwaves. Largest underground power network in Minnesota exposed. A lone black teen shakes the judicial system to its core. People called Jordan Morgan many names. The Awakener, the child born from ashes, the symbol of a rising generation. On a cold, restless night, while Redwood Falls still nursed its raw wounds, Jordan returned to the place where Marcus used to sit and dream, a small stone bench by the edge of Palmetto Lake. He sat down, gripping an old photo of the two brothers. "What does loss teach us?" Jordan whispered into the night breeze. "That freedom is never handed out like a gift. That justice never arrives on its own. That to forge a new future, someone must be willing to lose everything. And if that someone had to be him, then he was willing." Jordan lifted his head, the streetlights reflecting in his fierce, determined eyes. He knew Today's victory was only the beginning. The fight against injustice would be long, painful, and relentless. But this time, Jordan would not stand alone. A new generation had awoken. From the ashes he had helped ignite. He rose from the bench and stepped into the night, into history.